In November 2021, two young women, Christy Giles and Hilda Marcela Cabrales, were found unresponsive outside Los Angeles hospitals under disturbing circumstances. The events leading up to their deaths painted a chilling picture of deception, drugs, and foul play. This case, driven by digital evidence and witness accounts, eventually led to the arrest of multiple suspects, exposing a hidden predator who had been evading justice for years.
Christy Giles, a 24-year-old model, and her friend, 26-year-old architect Hilda Marcela Cabrales, were enjoying a night out in Los Angeles on November 12, 2021. They started their evening at the exclusive Soho House before moving on to a warehouse party, where they danced in the VIP section. Surveillance footage captured them having fun, unaware of the danger looming ahead. At the party, they met David Pierce, a 39-year-old self-proclaimed Hollywood producer, and his two associates, Brad Osborne and Michael Ansbach. Pierce had a reputation for providing drugs at social events, allegedly using them to lure unsuspecting victims back to his apartment. According to police reports, Pierce offered the women cocaine, and text messages later recovered showed that Hilda asked Christy, "Do you want coke?" To which Christy replied, "Yes." The two friends were last seen leaving the warehouse party with Pierce and his associates in the early hours of November 13th. At 5:30 in May, Christy sent Hilda a wide-eyed emoji text saying, "Let's go." Hilda responded that she would call an Uber, estimating its arrival in 10 minutes. This would be the last communication from either of them. Surveillance footage later revealed that the Uber did arrive at Pierce's apartment, located at 8641 West Olympic Boulevard, but left after waiting for 5 minutes. Neither woman got in. According to a neighbor, distressing noises were heard from the apartment between 10:30 and 4 p.m. that day. Moaning and groaning were reported, but no one called the police. What exactly happened inside remains unclear. At 4:19 p.m., Pierce and Osborne were seen on security footage carrying Christy's lifeless body down the back stairs. They placed her in a black Prius without license plates and drove off. Minutes later, they dumped her body at the Southern California Medical Center. Hospital staff were shocked when they saw two men drop off a woman and drive away without leaving any identifying information. They claimed to have found her passed out on a sidewalk, but hospital personnel found the story suspicious. Approximately 2 hours later, Pierce and Osborne returned to their apartment to retrieve Hilda. Like before, they carried her unconscious body to the Prius and drove her to Kaiser Permanente Hospital, where she was admitted in critical condition. Unlike Christy, Hilda was still alive when she arrived. However, doctors determined that she had suffered a severe overdose. Her condition rapidly deteriorated, and she was placed on life support. Both women had a lethal mix of cocaine, fentanyl, and GHB, known as the date rape drug, in their systems. Investigators strongly suspected that they had been drugged against their will. Jan Silliers, Christy's husband, was in San Francisco at the time. When he woke up, he noticed Christy's phone was at an unfamiliar location. He became increasingly alarmed when her location later moved to the hospital. Desperate for answers, he called the hospital, only to be told that his wife had passed away. Horrified, he began piecing together her last movements. He used social media to track down anyone who had seen Christy and Hilda the previous night, eventually identifying the Olympic Boulevard address as the last place they were known to be alive. By this time, Hilda's family had also rushed to Los Angeles. Her parents, devastated by what they saw at the hospital, knew their daughter would never have willingly taken such a deadly combination of drugs. After nearly 2 weeks on life support, Hilda was declared brain dead just a day before her 27th birthday. Jan shared the apartment address on social media, and responses quickly poured in. Several people recognized it as belonging to David Pierce, a man with a dark past. Reports surfaced that he had been preying on women for years, allegedly drugging and assaulting them. Authorities began digging deeper. They discovered that Pierce had previously been arrested on multiple sexual assault charges, some dating back to 2010. However, none of those cases had resulted in convictions. As more women came forward with accusations, it became clear that Pierce had a long history of criminal behavior. Police traced the movements of Pierce and his associates using surveillance footage and witness testimony. They confirmed that the black Prius used to dump Christy and Hilda's bodies belonged to Pierce's roommate, Brad Osborne. Within 3 weeks, Pierce, Osborne, and Ansbach were arrested. However, only Pierce remained in custody, facing unrelated sexual assault charges while the murder investigation continued. Authorities worked to build a case against him, eventually charging him with 2 counts of murder for the deaths of Christy and Hilda. Osborne was charged as an accessory to murder but was released on bail. Ansbach, who was also present that night, was never formally charged and later agreed to testify against Pierce. The case was complicated by the presence of voluntary drug use. Defense attorneys argued that Christy and Hilda had taken drugs of their own accord. However, prosecutors maintained that Pierce knowingly provided them with fentanyl-laced substances, leading to their deaths. In February 2025, after a lengthy trial, David Pierce was convicted of first-degree murder and multiple counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to life in prison. The trial against Osborne ended in a mistrial, as jurors remained deadlocked. Despite the conviction, the families of Christy and Hilda continue to grieve. Their deaths serve as a tragic reminder of the dangers lurking behind seemingly glamorous parties in Los Angeles.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a story, well, it's about Hollywood nightlife. All the allure, the excitement, the dreams, But sometimes there's a darker side, lurking beneath all the glamour. And that's what we're going to explore today, the tragic story of Christy Giles and Hilda Cabrales.
Yeah, this case it captivated everyone, didn't it? Not just because of how it ended, but because it kind of exposed this disturbing side of Hollywood, the underbelly.
Right, okay, so Christy, she was a 24-year-old model, full of life, big dreams, the whole thing. And Hilda, she was 26, super talented architect, also chasing her dreams. On November 12, 2021, they decided to, have a girls' night out in L.A. Started at Soho House, pretty exclusive place. Ended up at a warehouse party.
Yeah, Soho House. That's a big name.
Yeah. Typical night out. Dancing, hanging out. They were in the VIP section.
And this is where they meet David Pierce. He was 39, claimed to be a Hollywood producer, of course. But Pierce had a reputation, and not a good one. He was known for offering drugs at these parties.
Right, not exactly the kind of producer you want to meet.
Not exactly.
So they meet Pierce and two of his associates, Brand Osborne and Michael Ansbach. We know from texts, they were recovered later, that Hilda asked Christy if she wanted coke, and Christy said yeah.
So it seemed like just another night out, right? Reckless, maybe, but just a night out. Security footage even shows them dancing, having a good time, seemingly.
Yeah, but then at 5:30 a.m., Christy texts Hilda, "Let's go," and she adds a wide-eyed emoji to the text. And Hilda replies saying she's calling an Uber.
That text, man, especially that emoji, it's chilling, looking back.
Chilly.
Makes you wonder, was Christy, sensing something? Was she starting to feel, I don't know, something more than just the cocaine?
It's a good question. And here's another piece of the puzzle. The Uber actually arrived at Pierce's apartment on Olympic Boulevard, waited for 5 minutes, then left. Neither Christy nor Hilda got in.
5 minutes? That's a lot of time to just be standing there, and that was the last anyone heard from them. What happened in those 5 minutes?
It's the big question, right? Haunts this whole case. And then it gets, murkier. We know from a neighbor's report that there were these disturbing noises coming from Pierce's apartment between 10:30 a.m. and 4 p.m., moaning, groaning.
Moaning and groaning in L.A. That could be anything, right? A city like that.
Sadly, yeah. Nobody called the police.
It's that tragic what if. Maybe people just didn't want to get involved, or maybe they were just desensitized, big city life. But it's a reminder that even the smallest things, doing something, not doing something, it can have huge consequences.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. But it gets worse. 4:1 p.m., security footage shows Pierce and Osborne carrying Christy's body, she's lifeless at this point, down the back stairs of the apartment.
Okay, so they don't call 911.
All right.
They don't get help. Instead, they try to get rid of the body. That just screams guilt, doesn't it? Cover up. I mean, what else could it be?
They put it in a black Prius, no license plates, and they drive off. They end up leaving her body at Southern California Medical Center. They tell the staff they just found her, passed out on the sidewalk.
Come on, who does that? Just leave someone like that.
The hospital staff, they were suspicious.
Huh.
And here's the thing. They don't go back to the apartment for Hilda for another 2 hours.
2 hours? What were they doing for 2 hours? Cleaning, panicking, figuring out what to do. It's not random, right? This is deliberate. They're trying to control the story.
Exactly. It's a huge red flag. They eventually go back. They get Hilda, take her to a different hospital, Kaiser Permanente. But for Christy, it was too late. Hilda was still alive, but unconscious. And this is where it gets, even more shocking. The doctors, they discovered that both women had this lethal mix of drugs in their systems. Cocaine, fentanyl, and GHB.
Fentanyl, that's scary stuff. It's so potent and people don't always know it's there. Mixed in with other drugs is a huge problem, especially in those party scenes.
Right. And this is where Christy's husband, Jan Silliers, he comes into the picture. He was in San Francisco at the time. He starts to worry because Christy's phone location, it wasn't making sense. Then it moved to a hospital. He calls, and that's when he finds out his wife is gone. Just devastating.
Awful.
So he's determined to figure out what happened. He starts using social media, trying to piece together Christy's last hours, reaching out to anyone who might have seen them that night, and that's how he learns about the apartment on Olympic Boulevard. He shares the address online, and suddenly it's like this floodgate opens, all this information starts pouring in.
Wow. Social media, sometimes it's the only way, people power.
So now we have these two young women, both found with these deadly cocktails in their systems, a mysterious 2-hour gap in the timeline, and Christy's husband starting to uncover some really disturbing stuff about David Pierce.
So yeah, Jan, he really blew the lid off this whole thing. All this stuff about Pierce, it starts coming out, people sharing stories about him, and it's not good. This guy, he was using this idea of being a Hollywood big shot to lure women in to take advantage of them. Bad news.
It's crazy how social media can be this tool for good, but also for bad.
Right.
In this case, it was like this digital detective helped expose this predator.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the cops, they were watching. They start digging into Pierce's past, and guess what? They find a history of sexual assault allegations going back to 2010.
2010, that's a long time.
Yeah, and none of those cases, they didn't stick, no convictions, but the pattern, I mean, come on, this wasn't just, a one-time thing.
It makes you think, how many other women, right, how many maybe didn't come forward? Maybe they were scared, or they thought, who's going to believe me?
It's the sad truth, isn't it? People don't want to talk about this stuff, especially if drugs or alcohol are involved. But Jan, what he did, it helped, it made it okay for others to share their stories.
Yeah, he's a brave guy.
For sure.
So within weeks, Pierce, Osborne, and Ansbach, they're all arrested. But here's the thing. Pierce, he stays locked up because of those other sexual assault charges. Osborne, though, he gets charged as an accessory to murder, and then he's out on bail. And Ansbach, well, he cuts a deal. He agrees to testify against Pierce. No charges for him.
And this is where it gets tricky. Legally, why were the charges different for each guy? Well, it all depends on how involved they were, what evidence they had against them. Osborne being an accessory, that means he helped Pierce after the fact, allegedly. And Ansbach, his testimony, that was huge. The prosecution needed that to really nail Pierce.
Makes sense. So the trial starts, and the defense are saying that Christy and Hilda, they took the drugs willingly. Tragic accident, that's all. But the prosecution, they're saying, no way. Pierce, he knew those drugs were laced with fentanyl, and he gave them to those women on purpose. It was intentional.
And that's the tough part. Proving intent, it's like a chess game. You have expert witnesses going back and forth, each side trying to spin the evidence their way. And when you add in the fact that, they took drugs willingly, it gets messy.
Legally, it's a gray area, right?
Yeah.
Even if they took the drugs, did they know the risks? Did they know about the fentanyl?
Exactly. That's what the jury had to decide. Was this a tragic accident or was it something more, something darker? They were out for days thinking about all the evidence, the witnesses, the experts, and then they had a verdict.
Okay, so after all that, what did they say? What happened?
February 2025. David Pierce, guilty. First-degree murder for both Christy Giles and Hilda Cabrales. And on top of that, multiple counts of sexual assault. Those other victims who came forward, that was because of Jan, Pierce got life, no parole, he's never getting out.
Wow, life. That's a big win for the prosecution. And for the families, I mean, that must have been some relief, some sense of, justice. But what about Osborne? What happened with him?
Osborne's trial, it ended in a mistrial. Hung jury, they couldn't agree. And that's the thing about the law, Sometimes there's no easy answer, no happy ending.
Yeah, it must have been hard for the families. One guy's behind bars, but the other, he walks. It's not really over, is it?
It just shows you these cases, they're complicated. You've got consent, you've got fentanyl, proving what someone intended to do. It's not always black and white. And sometimes, justice, it doesn't look the way you want it to.
It's not fair.
No, it's not.
So we have this huge conviction, but it's bittersweet, Christy and Hilda, their lives were cut short. Their dreams are gone.
And their story, it really hit home for a lot of people. It got everyone talking about safety, about consent, about, the dark side of Hollywood. That whole scene, it's not always what it seems. And these predators, they can be anyone.
Yeah. And Jan using social media like that, it makes you think, how are we using technology? Are we using it for good? I mean, he exposed Pierce, but there's always that risk, right?
Yeah.
Misinformation, people getting harassed online.
It's a balancing act, for sure. But in this case, it worked. It held a predator accountable. It showed people that they can use these platforms to speak up, to be heard, especially when no one's listening.
So, what can we do? How do we stop something like this from happening again?
I think it starts with, being aware. We need to educate ourselves and each other about how dangerous drugs can be, especially fentanyl. It's so strong and it's hidden in other drugs people don't even know. That's why testing is so important. If you're going to use, test your drugs and never use alone, ever.
It's good advice. And what about red flags? How can we spot a predator, especially parties when everyone's relaxed, having fun, maybe not thinking straight?
Honestly, trust your gut. If someone is making you feel weird, if something feels off, don't ignore it. And if you see someone else and they look like they might be in trouble, do something, say something, ask for help. You never know. You might save a life.
Yeah, that bystander effect, it's real. We've all been there.
Right. But this case, it also showed how powerful community can be. Jan, he found out so much because people were willing to share what they knew. They supported each other online.
It's true. Even with all the bad stuff online, sometimes it's the only way to get things done, to get the truth out.
It shows that even when something terrible happens, we can still come together, share information, support the victims. It makes a difference. It makes things safer.
And Christy and Hilda's families, they've been through so much. but they've been amazing. They've used their grief to fight for justice, to warn others about the dangers. It's inspiring.
They're incredible people, and what they're doing, it's going to save lives. It's already saving lives.
So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from all of this?
I think it's a message of hope. We can't go back and change what happened, but we can learn from it. Be more aware, be cautious, and look out for each other. We can make it harder for predators to hide, and we can make it easier for victims to come forward.
It's a good message. We all need to hear that.
We do. And remember, if you need help, if someone you know needs help, there are resources out there. Don't be afraid to reach out.
That's so important. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It was the tough one, but it was an important one. Stay safe, everyone, and please look out for each other. We'll see you next time.